Today we're going to look at human evolution. So you should have seen diagrams like this before, representing millions of years, so 5 million years ago, all the way up until the present day. So you can see here that Homo sapiens from the genus Homo are the only modern humans around today, but we had plenty of ancestors dating back up to 5 million years ago. So the idea is that we all came from monkeys, and Darwin is the one who came up with this idea. He was quite poorly received for it, but through research and things like that, we've discovered that we have very similar anatomy to monkeys that live today and to intermediate humans from monkeys to the Homo sapien. The taxonomic family Hominidae refers to the great apes or chimpanzees, gorillas and orangutans, and it can include humans. Hominin refers to modern and extinct humans and their erect walking ancestors, including, for example, Australopithecus, Kenyanthropus, and the Homo genera. About 35 million years ago in Africa, the lineage to the modern apes separated from the old world primates. These extinct apes of the genus Ramapithecus features suggest the beginning of the human lineage. Ramapithecus had a short snout and small canine teeth. The fossil teeth are worn flat, suggesting a side-to-side chewing motion similar to that of humans, rather than the up and down motion as is the case with chimpanzees and gorillas. Australopithecus is a direct human ancestor. This genus was adapted for bipedalism, which is walking on two legs, with the body held erect and movement only on the two hind legs. The brain of Australopithecus was about 1/3 the size of that of a modern human. The Australopithecines lived 3 to 4.5 million years ago. Australopithecus afarensis lived about 3.9 to 3 million years ago, had a diet of fruit, nuts, seeds, tubers, which are like a root. They lived in East Africa. The environment that they lived in was a mixed habitat of savanna woodland with lakes and floodplains. Variation, so they had marked sexual dimorphism. Sexual dimorphism is where you have a distinct difference between the males and the females. Australopithecus aethiopicus lived about 2.7 to 2.5 million years ago, had a diet of hard, gritty food such as nuts and tubers, foods that required extremely heavy chewing. So what we would notice in a skull to give us this impression was that the teeth might be quite ground down and quite affected by grit, in that the teeth would show that they'd been eating gritty foods. Also, they would probably have a bone that suggested a large muscle attached to the jaw so that it could eat such gritty and hard foods. Lived in mixed habitat of savanna and woodlands, and obviously there's not enough fossil evidence to give us any idea as to whether there was a distinct difference between males and females. Australopithecus africanus lived about 2.3 million years ago up to 3 million years ago. Diet: fruit, nuts, seeds and tubers. Range: South Africa. Environment: mixed habitat of bush and woodlands. Variation: marked sexual dimorphism. And you can see here in the skull that we're getting to get a little bit more sort of human-like teeth, less ape teeth. However, they've got quite a distinct brow ridge still, and their face slopes quite a bit forward, which is very similar to that of a monkey. We then have the Australopithecus robustus. Lived 2 to 1 million years ago. Diet: hard, gritty food such as nuts and tubers. May have eaten some meat. Range: South Africa. Environment: mixed habitat of savanna and woodland, and they did have a marked sexual dimorphism. Australopithecus bozai, 2.3 to 1.2 million years ago. Diet was hard, gritty food such as nuts and tubers. Lived in East Africa. Environment: mixed habitat of savanna woodlands, and definitely had marked sexual dimorphism. Adaptations of the Australopithecine. Bipedal apes. Hominid structure of teeth and jaws appear to have required more grinding than an ape's diet. Male Australopithecines were larger in body size, 20 to 40% taller, 30 to 40% heavier than females. So that is what gives us that impression. that there was a distinct difference between males and females. Australopithecines were social animals. They were foragers, so they had strategies that we have today to forage and collect food. Australopithecines may have been carnivores as well, but definitely were herbivores. Australopithecines of 2 million years ago occurred in two forms: gracile, which is a very slender kind of form, and robust, which is kind of a more stocky, muscular format. Similar brain sizes as chimpanzees and gorillas, so even though they were bipedal and had very similar teeth and things like that to a human, still not as intelligent as the modern human. This video is on the Ning, if you would like to watch it. It's a YouTube video looking at a type of Australopithecine found. Man, in his arrogance, thinks himself a great work. It is more humble, and I believe true, to consider him created from animals. The Homo genus. We tend to have smaller faces, smaller teeth, larger brains, and are hunters. So if you have a look at the Australopithecine, you can see that it is much more stockier than that of a Homo erectus, which is an earlier human. So Australopithecines are seen to walk and to climb trees, whereas Homo erectus here is used to running and hunting and things like that. You'll also see that we tend to have sort of a leaner shape, and our pelvis is slightly smaller than that of the Australopithecine here. Homo habilis lived 1.9 to 1.8 million years ago, had a generalised diet and was likely to contain meat. Range East Africa, environment mixed habitat of savanna, and there seems to be some sexual dimorphism in this variety. Homo erectus, age 1.8 to 300,000 years ago. Diet, generalised diet including meat. Range Africa, Asia, Europe. So you should notice now that this is the first time we've talked anywhere outside of Africa. The idea with the Homo erectus is that they actually moved, and they are the ones that enabled modern humans to dominate the world. So they actually walked from Africa to different areas in the world. So they lived in variable climates, so from warm savannas to cold, temperate and deciduous forests. There seems to be some sexual dimorphism. There's a trend of increasing brain size from early to later Homo erectus, and great regional variation. This is also where they seem to find tools associated with the Homo genus, which gave us our edge as hunters. This film is also on the Ning. Homo neanderthals. So these guys lived 150 to 30,000 years ago. They had a generalised diet reliant very much on meat. They range from Europe, Middle East, West Asia. They lived often in woodlands. There is some sexual dimorphism and regional variation, so it means that in different regions there were different characteristics or different alleles present in that particular gene pool. Some believe this is not a true species but a regional variant of Homo sapiens. So for example, in Africa there might have been a type of Homo sapien that they believe was more robust, and the idea that perhaps it is its own species is questionable. And we now have the Homo sapiens. So the first Homo sapien was dated about 100,000 years ago and is obviously still alive today. We have a generalised diet. We range worldwide, arrived in Australia in 60,000 years ago, and arrived in North and South America 20,000 to 12,000 years ago. The environment obviously is highly variable because we can manipulate our environment with technology. Variation, sexual dimorphism. Older forms tend to be more robust. The more modern day are more gracile, so it means that we're a bit more slender. Things that separate us as humans. So our skull. If you have a look here are some sort of some chimpanzees or primates, and as we move through Australopithecus afarensis, then you've got a Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and some more Homo sapiens. You can see from the chimpanzee that cranial size or the brain casing gets larger the more developed we get. This is actually a a Neanderthal, which says Homo sapien Neanderthal, so the idea that perhaps it was in fact the same species, and that brain casing is huge. As I talked about the other day, the idea that Homo sapiens were more fit or better to survive is because of our ability to communicate. The other thing that you should notice is the slope of the face. So the Homo sapiens has quite a flat face, whereas chimpanzees have quite a protruding nose, as do the older forms of human. The other thing to note is the brow ridge. Chimpanzees have quite a dominant brow ridge, whereas humans are almost non-existent. The other thing to notice is where the spine actually attaches to the head. Now in a human, the foramen magnum is about here. Foramen magnum is the hole in which the spine attaches. The older you go, as far as humans and chimps and things like that, the foramen magnum is located further back, which gives us the idea that they were in fact walking on all fours rather than bipedal. The other thing to notice is the teeth, but we'll talk about that a bit later. So, larger brain casing, less defined brow ridge, foramen magnum more centered, flatter face, more prominent chin, which you can see here. These chins actually come out, whereas some of the chimps actually recede, and smaller distance between the nose and the mouth. Now, if we look here at the pelvis and the way in which the femur is positioned in the pelvis, a chimpanzee has quite a narrow and longer pelvis, and the femur is positioned pretty straight, and it comes straight down like this. An Australopithecine is looking a little bit more like a human in that its femur is positioned to actually go on an angle, which means that it's more weight bearing, which gives us the idea that this individual was bipedal. And here you have the human that has a longer femur, so better adapted to being bipedal, and quite a sturdy, wide pelvis. We then have the teeth, which is what I mentioned before. So here is an Australopithecine, here is a chimpanzee, and here is a human. So you should notice that the chimpanzee or primate has quite a narrow mouth, the human has quite a wide mouth. Here you can see in the Australopithecine there is still a canine present, but not quite as defined as that of a chimpanzee. And here you have the feet. So a chimpanzee has got an opposable toe, I suppose, so that it can sit and pick up things with its feet and its hands, enables it also to swing from branch to branch. The Australopithecine here you can see has an element of perhaps slightly opposable, but not really, and is far more close to the Homo sapien, which is flat-footed and all toes sort of are lined up to give balance rather than to be able to pick anything up. And that's all we're going to talk about today for human evolution.